All right, we're in Genesis still, and this is part B, and this lesson will be on this morning. So let me just slide this on over so we can see here. We talked about Cain kills Abel last week. I broke this up here. I kept debating on how I was going to do this one here for sure, but of course you see today we're going to talk about Noah, God preserving Noah and his family, about the issues around that, of course, what took place. And of course, Lord willing, we'll cover about the confusion of languages, the Tower of Babel. We'll deal with that. I know in your book you got, this is lesson 3. I took lesson 3 and I split this 3 ways, of course. And you think, John, you'll never get done with a survey at this rate. That's probably what you're thinking. If you want to do a high-level survey, just let me know and I'll cut out everything between there. But I feel like you need to know a little bit more in depth on some of this areas here, especially in part of this about Genesis. Because that's a foundation of other things to think of in light of everything else as well. So that's my perspective of going through this. I know lessons are set up on a 13-week series. You do that, you check the box off. Okay, let's go to the next series. I'm a little bit slower on that. And you see that if you're around me. It takes a little bit longer. Because there's such a wealth of information. I hate to say information, but things that you can learn from it. Not just information, but I'm talking about in the scriptures that we kind of gloss over sometimes and move on too fast. So this morning we're going to talk about Noah and his family. So if you're in Genesis chapter 6 is where we're going to pick up at this morning. It's where we're going to be at this morning. Here's the timeline that you have there. I ought to give you a quiz on this. Give you a blank, almost a blank one here. I might not put the words in or anything. Just see if you could fill one of these out, see how well you could do. It's not my exactly timeline I did. I used of course, in Dr. Cloud's book there, his information and put this together for you. But I think it helps to give you a bigger perspective of the layout of the land, I guess you want to say in the scriptures, how this comes together for you. But this morning we're going to talk about the flood. Okay, now if you see on that timeline, I put a red dotted line around the time period from the time of creation till the time of the flood. Now, I don't know how well you can read the numbers up there, but how many years is that, roughly? I know y'all getting your bifocals out, your binoculars out, trying to see if you can read that. And some of you are just shaking your head. This is an eye test, and I cannot do this eye test. Anybody see it? How many? 1,480. It's over 1,600, but close. 1,600 some years in between that. Keep that in perspective of time that's taken place, and that's going to come up again to you, okay? But I want you to see that in perspective here, because this is time from the time of creation, approximately, of course. All this, nobody pulled the calendar out. Okay, God started on this day, and this is the calendar runs like this. This is all estimation of what it was. But approximately 1,600 years period of time is covered here to the time of the flood for you. We're going to talk about Noah's, how God preserves his family, and the sinfulness of humanity, piety of Noah, the flood, and the covenant with Noah is what we're planning on touching on this morning for you. So if you happen to be in Genesis chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. And he took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, and yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were giants in the earth in those days, and also that when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, that they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. We're going to stop right there. Some people don't want to address this passage here, but there's 2 views. I even saw a third view on this passage here. What was taking place here? Who were these people that were involved here? So there's 2 views here, and I like Leon Wood's book, what he said about this particular situation. David Cloud also points this out. David Cloud also points out a third view as well about kings of the earth at the time became here. But I want you to see this. You can go either way. That's up to you, your viewpoint, what you want. But I want you to see these 2 key views here. Now, let me back that up for a second. What are the 2 views? Let me ask you. You probably just read what I put up there. But what are the two views on this passage here? What took place?
One view was that they were godly descendants of Seth, and the other view was that they were angels.
That's the short of it. Yeah, the word says the sons of God. People think, oh, that was angels that came down and had relationships with women, became married to them, and had children who became great. And that's what we're going to talk about. The other one is the godly line of Seth involved here, with the ungodly line of Cain, of course. So there's two views here. I want you to see what I explained. I'll show you what Leon Wood says. I think he explains it better than I do. So that's why I put this in there. The two views have commonly set forth regarding the marriages in Genesis chapter 6. Namely, that they were the unions between angels and earthly women. That's one view. Okay? The other is that they were unions between the Sethites, which is the descendants of Seth, his line, and the Cain's descendants. Okay? The two. That's the two views there. Now, I could do a poll in here and ask you in this room, what do you think it is before we go further? Anybody? Or you don't want to answer?
Well, Jesus taught that angels didn't marry.
Good point. Good point. Anybody else? Or you just don't care? Or I don't care, I don't know. Anybody?
I think the descendants of Seth is who they married, intermarried with.
What is that, Brother Fritz? The descendants of Seth and Cain?
Well, Seth, I'm not sure, you can, maybe Cain, the descendants of Cain would probably were. I mean, they're not going to distinguish between them.
Right, yeah. Good point.
But, I read something that made me believe that, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
That's fine. That's quite all right. Quite all right. Anybody else want to put their 2 cents in? This is a Sunday school class. I know we televise this. I understand that. But this is a Sunday school class for you in here as well. So we can interact with each other if you have a thought or anything. Anybody? Nobody. Okay, let's move on. The rationale for the later view, which the later view is Seth, the descendants of Seth, and the descendants of Cain, has been noted in the significant scriptural presentation of the two lines as ungodly and godly. Ungodly would be the descendants of Cain, and the godly would be descendants of who? Seth. Also, history shows that the common result of marriages between godly and ungodly people, what does it result in? Being unequally yoked together. That's right. See, the deterioration of the godly to be like the ungodly, and the stress of following verses in chapter 6 is on such deterioration at this time. Keep this perspective in mind about this Genesis chapter 6, what it's in dealing with here. Because if you've read the whole chapter of Genesis chapter 6, you see what? Maybe I'm asking the question too soon. We'll go through chapter 6 and we'll wrap it up. We'll get through that part. Besides this, verse 2 speaks of permanent marriages, not merely illicit relationship. Genesis 6:2 said that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. He continues on. In favor of the angel view is the fact that Job 1:6, the term says sons of God, clearly refers to angels. Okay, that's why people say the angel view, as they call it. It seems strange, however, that God would see fit to permit angels to contribute to man's spiritual deterioration when man was bad enough in himself not to need any outside help to make him worse. And just like Terry had mentioned in Matthew chapter 22, when the Lord said the angels do not engage in marriage, they're not able to do so. So, what's your thought? Or you want to chew on that one. My position is, you want to know, that's what you're probably thinking. What is John's position on this whole thing? I think it's the godly sons, the descendants of Seth with the ungodly descendants. Because the intermarriage there that took place. Because if you see through Genesis chapter 6, you see what's happening here. what is happening from the very beginning. It's key about this verse here about it became to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. And go down to verse 3. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive man, for he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. And he goes on about the giants. And he says, and God, in verse 5, and God saw that the wickedness of man did what? It just got worse and worse. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, about how the wickedness of man. So I think that's what it deals with. You can choose the other view if you like, and all that. It's up to you. But you also keep in mind, too, how long these people live. This is a dead class. What happened? Y'all didn't get your coffee this morning or get your Wheaties or something this morning. How long did people live back then? In this time period, particularly? Hundreds of years at that. We're going to talk about that in a second, the population growth here in a minute. But how many years they lived like this? And hundreds of years.
John,
Yes.
their time the same as ours?
Their time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Equal to a year.
Pardon?
Was a year, one of their years equal to one of our years?
I would say so. And what year we got right now? What year are we in now? A leap year, aren't we? Yeah. In case y'all didn't know it. Somebody didn't know they were in a leap year already. But we're in a leap year. Side note. All right, so let's go on with this, okay? That's my viewpoint. These are the godly descendants of Seth and the ungodly descendants of Cain, intermarriage here taking place. And hopefully you see it as we go through chapter 6 here a little bit more about that, is where my viewpoint is. But thinking about this, the population here, the population of growing. This is from Henry Moore's study Bible. I thought was interesting about population. He points out with each man and woman enjoying hundreds of years of parental productivity, plus also almost ideal environmental conditions. Think about what their conditions were they lived in, the land they lived in, how it was. They weren't in the Garden of Eden anymore, but they were outside of that. But the land what God had provided for everybody out there. And the situation. The earth could have well been filled with people long before the flood ever took place. For example, an initial population of 2 people increasing at the rate of 2% annually, this is estimated to be the annual growth rate at present, would generate a population with over 10 trillion people in those 1,600 years. You're thinking, whoa.
Maybe if no one died.
We're assuming they died. Somebody died along the way. Death still took place along that. But the thing is that they had children, just like you saw about Adam and Eve. Remember, we talked about that briefly last week, after Cain and Abel, and after Abel was slain. They had what? Sons and daughters. And Adam lived for how long? Over 900 years, right? Remember, I was kind of joking about last week when Eve comes to Adam and said, Adam, we're having we got another baby. I mean, they're like, how many we got now? You know, after all these years, they keep having babies, having children, okay? And what happens? The children have children, and it just keeps growing, of course. So the idea is that I think is interesting. May not have been 10 trillion, could have been, he says, mathematically, if you worked it all out. But the idea is that what? The population was growing with people. And what was the hearts of people, like God said? What did the Lord say about them? Wickedness. Wickedness. Because the sinful nature of people. Okay. And for those who don't know, I've offered, I have been emailing this out to who wanted this. I emailed my lessons out to you. This is a side note, we're trying to work it out so when you see this presentation, there's a link there, you can just go to it and get it. We're trying to work that into so you can download this lessons as we go through this. But thanks for Randy's suggestion. We're working on that right now. Okay, the sinfulness of humanity continued, the wickedness. Look in chapter 6 and verse 5 going down through there. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Do we not also in our lifetime experience thoughts that come in our mind like, where did this thought come from? Where do these things, People have thoughts and they do their imagination and they implement those imaginations, those thoughts that come into their mind. Look around us now in our day and age, what's happening even now, the violence that takes place, all the atrocities that are taking place around us all the time. And how the Lord points out back then, God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and the beast and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them. Man's wickedness. I wanted to point out here, and let's put this together here to show this while God points out about the wickedness of this, about man's wickedness that we just read in verse 7. But it was what? It was great in verse 4. Every imagination thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Evil continually. Earth was corrupt, verses 11 and 12. We go down 11 and 12, and he says, when God talks to Noah, he says, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, in verse 12, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. All flesh had corrupted their way with the violence as well. It was filled with that. We think about now, around us now, we see things going on that we never thought would happen, but they're happening now around us, of course. In our society we see. I don't know about you, every time we turn on the TV, if you look at the news, what do you see? Somebody got shot. Somebody got killed. Around here. Not somewhere else, around here. Around our neighborhoods, around our areas. We've seen this all the time, the violence that's taken place around us. Can you imagine back then? Can you imagine that back then with those people living for hundreds of years that they were doing, the things that we're doing, how it got worse? The wickedness that prevailed. So let's talk about Noah here. Verse about the piety of Noah. And Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. With all those millions of people probably present on the world, and if you did those calculations that Henry Morris did, he said it could be 10 trillion people, whatever. The numbers of people, but there was one guy, kind of like somebody else, remind you of somebody else? We talked about him. There's a book about him in the scriptures. Job. Remember Job? But here God talks about there's grace. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. You see this piety about Noah here. He found grace in the eyes of the Lord. He was a just man. He's perfect in his generations, and he walked with God. You would think with all those people out there, there'd be more people that were doing it, walking with the Lord. But it says here about him. Now about him, it says he's the example, and I point this out, he is the example of Noah teaches believers of every age that it's possible to please God, what? Really, regardless of the situation you live in. No matter what the society that's around us, we can still live for the Lord, can we not? Hello? Yes. I think so. I mean, this must be the rain. Don't let the rain make you tired and sleepy. Come on. But we can live for the Lord. No matter how bad it is around us and the circumstances around us, we could still live for the Lord, just like Noah did. Can you imagine this guy living in that society that he lived in? And it's not like he just lived for a few years. He was old. He was up to 500 years old. We'll talk about that when he built, building the ark and all that. And all the society going on around and the wickedness going on. But it says what about him? Here's the guy who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. He was a just man. He was a perfect in his generation. He walked with God. We can walk with God too. With all this around us, we can still walk with God, can we not? Yes, we can. We always can. So the flood. I'm glad the Lord brought the rain on us today. I mean, just the timing of this to think about the flood. But I know y'all think, well, I wish it wasn't raining trying to get in church and all that. But still, it's the blessings that God had provided here. So looking down here in verse, moving on down through Genesis here, in verse 12, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. I want to stop for a second just to think about that. I already said to you earlier how long people were living. Hundreds of years, hundreds of years. And I want you to get the perspective of that. For those hundreds of years, the imaginations of people, the violence, the wickedness, how it just kept growing and growing and growing. And you know what the Lord said earlier, verse 3? What did he say about man? Back it up on time. For that his also flesh, and yet his days shall be 120 years. And he's telling there in 120 years, judgment's going to come. But also about, we'll see this later on, about us now. How long do we live? How long are we expected to live? 70 or 80 years? Right. We don't live hundreds of years like they did. What's taking place. So with that in mind, let's go on here. And God said to Noah, okay, he said, I will destroy the earth. And then God talks about what? He explains to Noah what? About the ark. And I'm not going to, about the ark here. And he says, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without. And he tells how to build this ark. God tells Noah what to make it of and how to make it. And how it's to be, the whole design. Gives Noah the information he needs to build this ark. It's just, instead of just telling Noah, I want you to go out and build this ark. It's like, what's an ark? What do you want me to do? Build what? No, God told him what to build, and how it's to be built, and the size of it to be built for this purpose here, and all that, how it's to be done. The Lord instructed Noah about the building of the ark. He gave out the layout, the dimensions, and its purpose. And what was the purpose of the ark? What was the purpose of the ark? To save their lives. Noah and his family, to save their lives. And to bring judgment. When judgment comes on the earth, I remember years ago, I remember there was a song about come into the ark. There was a song about, I can't remember who sang that song about the ark. And what's it illustrate? What does it illustrate to us, the ark? Our preservation in Christ. Coming into Christ. Accepting Christ as our Lord and Savior and being rescued by Him. The ark does. An illustration for us.
John, I think it's interesting just how specific, like you just said. God was very specific on how what Noah needed to do to save him and his family. There was no other way. You couldn't climb a tree, couldn't build a raft. If you didn't get on the ark,
Mm-hmm.
perished.
Yep, and gave the... Very good.
There's no other way.
That's right. There's only one way, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. It's by Christ. This is the way. This is the rules, I guess you want to call it. This is the way God laid it out. And He laid out for the ark. Thank you. Brother Fritz?
If you think about your prayer life and you're praying for something and you think you got an answer from God, sometimes the way is sometimes clearer than other times. But for Noah, it had to be, like, Teresa was in, perfect. He didn't say, this many cubits, and then Noah thought, well, maybe I got that wrong. Down at Home Depot, they don't sell them in that length. Maybe he meant this, none of that. He did it the way God wanted. And also, can you imagine if the rains have come, there's people out there begging, I would imagine, begging to get on this floating vessel that, saving all these other people, let us on too. And he had to, God had to tell him, identify who was going to get on and let the other ones be forsaken. They're gone. And you're standing there looking over the edge there, and they're out there yelling at you. You've got to be real sure in your prayer life and your communications with God that that's really what He meant. That your family is saved, they are not. And you're doing what He wanted you to do. I'm just kind of bringing up the prayer life thing and being assured of what God is telling you.
Good point about just prayer life. Noah's prayer life with the Lord, knowing what the Lord wanted done, of course, exactly.
In his case, it may have been more than prayer life. It could have been, an afternoon session. Okay, sit here on this tree stump and I'll tell you some things.
Yes, Sister.
Another thing is that they had never had a rain
That's right.
before that, so that would really make it even wilder. Yeah, we're gonna have a flood, what's coming from the ground, yeah.
That's a good point, because they didn't know, and they didn't know what rain was. Never experienced that. And probably, I would think, what's an ark? People seeing it, what is this thing to be doing on dry land? Yes?
One thing, as you were reading, I thought, missionaries can be on the field for years. Yet Noah preached for 120 years and didn't have not one convert.
Yep.
And yet, yes, it is hard, but when the Lord tells you to do something, you're to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's why we also need to pray for our missionaries, more fervently every day, because they're probably facing what Noah faces, what Noah faced for 120 years.
Well, you think of, and a good point, because you think about when missionaries are out there on the field and they preach their heart out, pray for them, because they probably get discouraged. I mean, they probably get discouraged that they don't see any fruit sometime. How many of y'all ever heard of Adoniram Judson? Ever read about Adoniram Judson? Anybody? Okay, I see 2 hands, a couple of hands went up. If you ever get a chance, read his book. It's a book about biography about On the Golden Shore, about him serving in Burma in the 1800s, early 1800s. Preached for years. I think it took 7 years before he had his first convert to ever happen. Can you imagine how discouraging that would be in serving the Lord and not having even any kind of fruit seems to be happening here for you? Think about Noah preaching when he's preaching the preacher of righteousness that he preached then, and nobody else to join him on the ark at all. Good point, Lynn.
We give up. Most of the time, a lot of times if we don't get something, we want it right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we think we can pray, and it's just like going through Hardee's or Chick-fil-A, and I need it now.
If I can add on, also as humans, we look for confirmation that we're doing the right thing, that we're going the right way. If there's no proof, we start thinking, well, maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And we change course.
Yeah.
It's not just that we give up. It's there's no fruit here. I'm going to try this other way.
Yeah. Good point. Anybody else? Anything else? Well, Noah was instructed on what to do, and he did it exactly like the Lord said, how big it's supposed to be, what he wanted to be. I don't know if y'all have ever seen in Pennsylvania. I'm trying to remember that place. They did Noah, the story of Noah. I don't know if you've ever seen that in Noah. That is amazing. Do you ever have a chance to see if they ever do that presentation there in Pennsylvania? I'm trying to think of is it called Noah? Sight and Sound Theater. Yeah, Sight and Sound Theater. I've seen it a couple of times. It is amazing to see that production there taking place. And do you feel like you're on the ark almost, is the way they get the setting up for you. It's amazing to experience that if you have a chance to. If I don't know how often they show it and when it's available for you to see that. I'll talk about the ark encounter at the very end of this later on. But so the day of judgment, Genesis chapter 7, you see here. Let's go. I'm skipping over some of this. We get down here. And verse 22, like in Genesis chapter 6:22, just like Teresa said, and thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him. So did he, exactly like God wanted him to do. So now we're going to talk about the judgment. In Genesis chapter 7 here, you got the judgment here. And the Lord said unto Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have seen righteousness before me in this generation. And of every clean beast shalt thou take to thee by sevens the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also the air by sevens, the male and the female, and to keep seed and live alive upon the face of the earth. For yet 7 days will I cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the floods of waters was upon the earth. Again, interesting. Noah did what? He did everything God told him to do, exactly what he's told him to do. And what did the Lord tell him? What did the Lord tell him about what's going to take place? He told him about the animals they had to take with them, but also he told him something else. The timing. God says in 7 days, you got 7 days for all this to come about, to load the ark up. I'm pretty sure the Lord helped him on this part, getting all these animals in. They had to be there to get them on there in time. But then God said, in 7 days, the door's going, that's it. The rains are going to be coming. You think of God's graciousness in all of this. You think horribleness of people dying, but the horribleness is that the people chose not to believe. Of all the time they had the word preached to them, all of that. They chose not to believe, to accept. Can you imagine? When he's building this ark, where are the people at? Way down the road somewhere, They probably come by and pointed at, this crazy, what is this crazy guy doing, All them people kept poking at him like, you're crazy. This is wild. This does not make sense to us. It does not make sense to us mentally, so it must not be right. And that's what we hear about nowadays. People do not understand the scriptures and say, well, it must not be right. That viewpoint. He was doing it like he was instructed to do it. Can you imagine that? Noah building this day in and day out, telling his wife, okay, honey, we're going to have a good breakfast this morning. Us and the boys are going out there and we're working on the ark again. And working on it again and again, every day, building that ark. And no matter what the neighbors are saying or how bad they're talking about us, we're still sticking to it. And they built this ark. In verse 13 down here, 7:13, he says, verse 11. Let's go down to verse 11. Well, I don't know, I'm trying to skip over passages not to take too long, but verse 10. And it came to pass after 7 days, and the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons with him into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. They went into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, and wherein is breath of life. And they went in, male and female of flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. The Lord closes the door. They're closed in. That was it. The time was up. When the rapture takes place, those people that you witness to, you talk to, what's going to happen with them? Our families, those who did not trust Christ as their Savior, did not receive him. The door is going to be shut to them. That's it. And the sad part is that Noah preached to those people day in and day out probably. And that ark's a testimony to them. The judgment was coming. They could see that. But the Lord had to shut the door on them. Verse 23, it says in verse 23, down there it says, and every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and the creeping thing and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And the Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And it talks about, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Only those who were within the ark. We know that, we understand that, but those were the only ones who were saved, because the water covered all the land that was there. They had never seen rain. There's no mention of rain at all. There's no of that taking place till now. And it says here, if you saw back in verse 7, verse 11, and the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened up for the rain to come down and the water coming out of the ground to create this tragedy that took place. But it was God's judgment on them, of course. So God preserves Noah, and it says there in the flood, in the New Testament, it says in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 2, and I didn't print my sheet of paper out, but we can go there. 2 Peter, if you go to 2 Peter there, I want these passages here. 2 Peter, if you already turn there. These 2 references, I meant too far. You see the one up there in 1 Peter chapter 3, and 2 Peter chapter 4. chapter 2, verse 4. We'll talk about that in a second in Hebrews here. So 1 Peter chapter 3 says, which sometimes were disobedient when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. God waited in the days of Noah to do what? To bring this judgment. While the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. Again, God's graciousness of waiting for people to get saved, but they choose not to do so. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 says, for God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, but spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom, he goes on, and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned with them an overflow, making them an example unto those that also should live ungodly, and delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For the righteous man dwelling among them, and seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day, and their unlawful deeds. That's talking about Lot there, of course, all this. For the Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. And that's what took place there. The ungodly were punished. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, you're probably familiar with that one. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, it says, by faith, and you think about that, by faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, and prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. You think about it. We said it earlier. Building this ark, go in and day out, building an ark, something they weren't familiar with. And he's doing it by faith for something what? He was told about by the Lord what was going to happen. What did the Lord tell him was going to happen? A flood was going to come. So what's a flood? By faith, he's going by faith in all of this. Because you see, where is it? In Genesis 6:13, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And he explains about the ark being built and what's going to take place there. By faith, Noah moved and did those things. By faith. So the duration. Here is a quote here I thought was interesting from Dr. Cloud's book. Noah was in the ark for 375 days. Noah and his family, of course. He entered in the ark on the 10th day of the 2nd month in the 600th year. 600th year of his life. And the rain started 7 days later on the 17th day of the 2nd month in the 600th year in Genesis. We just read that part. And he left the ark in the 601st year, the 2nd month, the 27th day, as it's listed here in chapter 8, verse 13 and 14. Thus Noah was in the ark for 1 year and 10 days. That's a long time to be on some of y'all have been on cruises. I know some people have been on cruises I heard about. But to be out there for over a year, out there, and that kind of living with that.
Another consideration, they were on the ark 7 days before it started raining.
Yeah.
I'm thinking around day 2 or 3, somebody's going to start looking outside and go, hey, are you sure about this?
Well, it's just him and his sons. The other people don't care out there. But yeah, maybe his son says, Dad, when's this going to happen? You know. But yeah, good point. God preserves Noah and his family, because in chapter 8 talks about about the duration of all that taking place, being out there, and of course the boat landing, the ark landing on the mountain up there. Then Noah's process of sending the dove out, send the raven out. What's interesting about it? What's the difference between a raven and a dove? I mean, in their characteristics, anybody? Besides the color, they're black, it's white, whatever. What's the significant difference between these? One's a scavenger, and that's the raven. He's a scavenger. He'll live off anything he can find out there. But the dove won't. He won't do that. Good point. So, he sends out the dove, and of course the dove doesn't come back after a while. It comes back one time, then it comes back later. with the olive tree. So down here in verse, this last part, the covenant with Noah's covenant. God also showed his mercy in chapter 9. If you turn to chapter 9, if you're not there already, I'm looking at my time here so I don't run out. Chapter 9 in verse, go to verse 9, chapter 9, verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into their hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof is the blood thereof. Shall ye not eat? And surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require it, the life of man. Whosoever sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. And you be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. And God spake unto Noah and said unto his sons with them, saying, and I behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, and of the fowl, with the fowl, and of the cattle, and every beast in the earth with you, and from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token of the covenant which I have made, which I make between me and you, and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a token for a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall no more become a flood and destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, and that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. God showed his mercy. I'm reading that part up there. God showed his mercy and his promise that he presented to man. God said he would not do what? Destroy the world with a flood anymore. The rainbow is a sign of the covenant between the covenant God made with Noah and with all the descendants. Are we not descendants of Noah? We benefit from that as well. All of us do. Okay. The Noahic, these are talking about the different covenants. I'm not going to do all these covenants. I'm just doing the one about Noah's covenant. You just saw here the key thing about Noah's covenant is it's unconditional, and God promised never again to destroy the earth by water. Well, there's other covenants we'll talk about at later times, of course. That was his covenant. We saw this last week about Cain and Abel, the judgment, the mercy, but now we see about the flood. The judgment is from God. God destroyed the world. But the mercy is God spared Noah and his family, and God made a promise not to flood the earth again whatsoever. Conclusion. There's two parts. There's two slides for the conclusion here. The long-term impact of the flood. The first one I want to point out is Earth's landscape was reshaped. With the breaking up the deep, and with the clouds and all that, the landscape was changed. All that was changed for them. And this is from a guy who wrote about the flood waters. Evidence such as the topography, if I say the words correctly, of continental shelves, the sea mounts, and the great submarine canyons indicate a former lower sea level. It is also important to consider that most of the Earth's surface now is covered by 70% of water. We're covered by water by 70% of that. And the Earth's entire surface was leveled. If all the land was if everything was just leveled out, all the mountains come down, everything was just totally leveled again, it says we would be in water 1.7 miles deep right now. That's hard to fathom. That's hard to fathom for us. I thought it was interesting. Therefore, if the mountains rose and the valleys sank, the water of the flood would have ended up mainly in the oceans, as you see. The mountains were created and the valleys were created, and so the water went down to the lowest points and created the oceans and all that we have now. And there are some depths of the oceans that are way deep down there, aren't they? It goes deep. A couple other points here, we're almost done. We're allowed to eat meat. God said what? He said in chapter 9 and verse 3 and 4, I just said that. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herbs shall I have given you, all things. The only thing is, the restriction is not the blood. Blood's important. And he says here, capital punishment, chapter 9, verse 5, verse 6. He talked about capital punishment. The Lord implements that, about capital punishment. The rainbow, we just talked about the rainbow here, God's promise here. And the life expectancy, this is the short part here, the life expectancy is what? Has changed. If you've read that we talked about in Genesis chapter 5 about Adam and all the descendants, the life expectancy was what? Hundreds of years. 300 years, 500 more years. Adam had Seth, and he lived another, hundreds of years later, had more children, sons and daughters. But after the flood, you see a decline in that. In chapter 11, and you can jump over there, chapter 11, we're going through all that. But chapter 11, verse 10, these are the generations of Shem. And Shem was 100 years old and begat Aphrodite, his 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he lived 500 years. But if you follow down through chapter 11, you start seeing a decline of two things. When they started having children, it was earlier, and they didn't live as long afterwards as well. But this is after the flood takes place. So our life expectancy is not as long anymore. Ark Encounter, I wanted to share that with you. Some of y'all have been to the Ark Encounter. I have not. I would love to go someday. I just have never been there. But I know some of y'all had made that trip a few years back. Did you all enjoy it? I see some heads, yeah, I enjoyed it. Some, yeah. It looks like it'd be impressive to see. So I just share that with people that haven't, they don't know about the Ark Encounter out there in Kentucky. I think it's what it has here. And one last thing I have here is other resources I thought was interesting to share with you. Dr. Cloud has in his book there about other resources. And I can't emphasize enough, if you want to study more and learn more other things, the resources are there for you. If you happen to have one of these, I'm going to get the book again, the big book, as I call it. If you happen to have this big book, you'll see in the very back of it, it has charts and tables and all that in the very back of the book, if you're not familiar with that. And he refers to that as one of the suggestions here.